With this, I can be with her.
In my fading consciousness, these were the words I heard from John. The joy in his voice made me bite my lip in frustration, questioning whether I would become a mere puppet to his desires. John descended the stairs, carelessly stepping over me, whom he had just hauled down, and started humming a tune as he headed to the living room. He was probably eyeing his mistress, paying no mind to me at all. I bit back my regret and passed out right there. When I woke up, I found myself in the hospital room. Looking around the room with a pouring headache, I saw John and a familiar woman who was sobbing uncontrollably. I instantly understood that John had brought his mistress to my bedside. Swearing revenge, I gritted my teeth, propped myself up, and confronted the two of them. My name is Michelle Thompson. I am 38 years old. I am a housewife leading an ordinary life with my husband John, who enjoys fishing. I first started to feel strange unease about our perfectly ordinary life about 6 months ago. John, who is usually indifferent to my calls or messages, started to become inseparable from his phone. I suspected something was off about John's behavior, but otherwise, everything seemed perfectly normal. Even when I subtly probed, he would shyly reply that he had become hooked on the fishing game app. Although my doubts persisted, his change didn't inconvenience me in any way, so I tried not to worry too much about it.
By the way, I'm going fishing this weekend.
Again? That's a full time this month.
Bob invited me. It's okay, right?
Even when John started going fishing more frequently with his fishing buddy Bob, I still tried to trust him. John, who usually only went out once or twice a month, started going out every weekend since last month. I was unable to say anything to John, who seemed to enjoy preparing his fishing gear, and thought it was inappropriate to interfere with his hobby, so I stopped prying further. He works hard on weekdays, so he should have his fun on weekends, right? With that thought, I saw John off every weekend and began my house chores. One day, amidst our usual routine, a phone call came in that turned my discomfort into certainty.
Hello? Michelle? Isn't John off today? Is he at home?
Huh? John? Bob, who was supposed to be going fishing with John, was asking me whether John was at home. I didn't immediately grasp the situation and couldn't respond right away.
Michelle, is something wrong?
John said he was going fishing with you today and left.
What? What do you mean?
Even though Bob seemed genuinely surprised, I had no answer for him. Bob said that he had called to share some of his good catch because he had a good day fishing. Upon checking, Bob confirmed that he was not with John. John had not made any plans to go fishing with Bob. In fact, Bob had invited John many times recently, but John had often turned him down.
I thought it was usual for him not to answer his phone, but why is he lying?
I'll call him from my side too. Remembering John's lie, I was reminded of the unease I had been trying to ignore. It was impossible for him not to notice Bob's call when he was always holding his phone. I decided to call John and ended the call with Bob. With a prayerful heart, I dialed John's number. Surprisingly, John picked up the call right away.
Hello?
Oh, John, what are you doing right now?
What do you mean, what? I told you yesterday that I'm going fishing with Bob.
John responded in a matter-of-fact tone. If I hadn't just spoken to Bob, I would have been easily deceived. A chill ran through me as I considered whether John had been lying so easily all this time. Furious with John, who seemed to think he could deceive me with such a sloppy lie, I continued the conversation. I actually need to speak with Bob. Could you put him on the phone?
Nah, can't do that right now. Bob's got a big one on his fishing line.
John responded with a laugh, as if Bob was actually there. Even more, he kept on with his one-man show, cheering on the absent Bob with phrases like,
Go Bob!
And,
This is a big one.
I could only sigh in exasperation at the sound of John's ridiculous voice. Well then, can you pass on a message to Bob?
Yeah, sure. What should I tell him?
Bob just called asking if you were at home. I told him you're with him, apparently.
Huh?
John, who had been talking non-stop, suddenly fell silent at my words. No, this is a mistake, he stuttered, and then abruptly hung up. Staring at the end call screen, I was certain that John was cheating. I was surprisingly calm as I wondered what John would say when he came home. After sending a message to Bob explaining the situation, I waited for John's return. John, who came home much earlier than usual, just apologized to me without any explanation. I decided not to pursue the matter further if he told me everything honestly. But all John did was apologize for lying and insisted he went fishing alone.
I'm really sorry. Please forgive me.
Just tell me everything honestly. We'll talk after that.
Like I said, I went fishing alone. This is the truth.
No matter how much I accused him of cheating, John stubbornly kept denying it. John insisted that if he said he went alone, he would be suspected of cheating. Even when I argued that lying was much more suspicious, all John did was apologize for being faultless.
I was alone, so there's no witness. It's inevitable that I'll be suspected.
So, just tell me everything truthfully.
Everything I've said is the truth. Trust me.
Even if he said that, John had just lied to me without the slightest hint of remorse on the phone. There's no way I could believe him. I told John to show me his phone. However, whether he had deleted all his exchanges with the other person or not, I couldn't find any incriminating evidence.
See? I didn't do anything wrong.
I was fed up with John, who looked smug as if he were admonishing me for doubting him. Even when confronted directly, it seemed John believed he could casually dodge the issue and escape. Disgusted by his insincere apology, I handed back his phone and gave up. John, who showed no sign of remorse, was bound to slip up again somewhere. With this in mind, I decided to keep a close eye on John, enlisting Bob's help. John kept his phone with him as always, saying,
I've nothing to hide,
and didn't decrease his weekend outings. Despite what had happened, didn't he even think about trying to regain my trust? On the contrary, John seemed to be more confident than ever. Just when I was going cold towards John, he suggested we go out for dinner on my birthday. What on earth is going on?
Well, I've upset Michelle, and I thought I should do something to show my sincerity.
Swallowing my word of, what now? I stared intently at John. I wish he would just tell the truth if he didn't want to upset me, but it seemed unlikely to get through to the cheerful John. Despite suspecting he was trying to appease me, I decided to go along with John's invitation. Do you really think you can win me over with just a meal? Sighing, I realized I trusted John less than I thought. Without minding my attitude, John rushed me.
I've made a reservation, so get ready quickly.
Reluctantly going upstairs to prepare, I found John's smartphone, which he usually wouldn't let out of his sight. Had he let his guard down, or did he think he could withstand scrutiny now? The carelessly placed device was gleaming, signaling a notification. It's John's fault for not telling the truth, so I decided without hesitation to check the notification. What? You're betraying me after all. A notification from an unknown name that wasn't there when I last saw his smartphone. The most recent message in the familiar exchange read, I can't wait to see you. She even had the nerve to send a heart emoji. Now, John has no chance of making excuses. Without being particularly surprised, I silently traced back the messages. While taking pictures with my smartphone, I checked for any incriminating exchanges. Even a complaint about having to delete the exchange because of my suspicion was written, and I had a bitter smile at the wealth of evidence. John had even messaged,
I wanted to go out to dinner with you, rather than my wife. Hey! What are you doing looking at my smartphone without permission?
At that moment, a flustered John ran up and yelled at me. Seeing me with his smartphone, he seemed pale. Sighing, I returned John's smartphone to him.
Why would you do such a thing?
If you hadn't lied, this wouldn't have happened.
So you couldn't trust me that much?
You have the audacity to lie to me like that, and still have the nerve to say such things? I retaliated against John, who was blaming me with an irritated attitude. There was no reason to be blamed for his wrongdoing in the first place. The reason he always carried his smartphone with him was probably because he didn't want it to be seen. Seeing John suddenly become defiant when caught, I had reached the end of my patience.
Did you think it was safe once you fooled me? What sincerity? So, this is you.
Me? What? You still want to blame me at this point? Ridiculous. When I read aloud the message I had just seen, John glared at me with a dissatisfied face and continued to remain silent. I no longer felt like going out for a meal with John and threw the bag I had been preparing, turned my back on John, and was about to return to the first floor.
Hey, where are you going?
I can't possibly go out to eat with someone like you. Why don't you go with the person in the message? You prefer her over your wife, don't you? I said to John, despising him. Both of us were heated and didn't seem capable of having a proper conversation. I was thinking of taking some time off when it happened. I felt a thud in my body, and my foot slipped off the stairs. Before I could even gasp, I realized that the staircase was right in front of my face. When I realized that John had pushed me down the stairs, I was lying on the floor, unable to move a single finger. My vision was shaking, and as I felt my consciousness fading, I heard John's voice.
It's your fault. You're the one who did something arbitrary.
Even in such a situation, the persistent John was still blurting out such things to protect himself. If I didn't call an ambulance myself, I would probably be abandoned by John. Out of such fear, I desperately clung to the smartphone in my pocket.
But this is good. Now I can be with her forever.
So, I was in your way that much. No sooner had John descended the stairs than he began humming a tune as he walked towards the living room, avoiding me as if I were an inconvenience. Presumably, he was preparing to go to a restaurant he had mentioned in his reservation. Without a care for me, he was likely inviting the person who had just messaged him. I passed out at the moment I heard John dialing someone's phone number. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital room. I looked around the room slowly, clutching my throbbing head, only to see John and a crying unfamiliar woman. For some reason, John looked even more disheveled than I was, and there was a slap mark on his face. Though I assumed she was the woman John was having an affair with, the unfamiliar woman continued crying without end. When they noticed I had wakened, they approached me with a worried look. "Michelle, you've come around! Thank goodness!" "Who are you?" "I am, The woman who introduced herself as Lisa began to reveal her identity, wiping her tear-filled red eyes with a handkerchief. As I had expected, she appeared to be the woman John was having an affair with, and she started apologizing in a sobbing voice for a terrible thing she had done, saying, "I'm sorry. When I heard that John had put his wife through such an ordeal, I couldn't stay put, so I came here." "Is that so? So you're the one who called the ambulance?" It seemed that Lisa had hit John hard enough on the cheek to make it red, harshly blaming him for his actions. I had thought for sure that she was the one who had called the ambulance for me, but she shook her head. At that moment, the door to the room opened, and Bob, who was said to be the one who had actually called the ambulance, entered the room.
"Michelle, how are you feeling?"
"Oh yes, I'm fine. I still can't quite take in the situation though."
"I guess so, considering what I've heard from these two. Let me explain."
Bob sat down on the chair, giving John a scornful look, and began to explain the details. After John had pushed me down the stairs, he really did go to a restaurant with Lisa that he had invited me to. It seems that Bob arrived at our house just after John had left. In my fading consciousness, I had been clutching my phone, sending Bob an odd message. Bob, noticing this, tried to contact me, but he couldn't get through, so he came to check on me. Then, he became suspicious of the open window with the curtains left open, and when he looked in, he found me lying there. "Is that so? Thank you. I'm not sure how to express my gratitude.
Not at all. I'm just glad you're okay.
I thanked Bob. Then I sighed and turned to John, who had been silent and looking guilty ever since. This man had pushed me down the stairs and then left me there while he went out to eat without a care in the world. As I pulled a face, Lisa began to apologize to me again, crying. I was really shocked to hear about this. I never thought he was this kind of person. So, you think you can be forgiven for having an affair with another woman's husband if you cry and apologize? No, but I didn't mean it like that. I didn't know he was married. At her words, I snorted and said, Oh, really? With a sarcastic laugh. She could apologize all she wanted, but I was absolutely livid when I saw her trying to act as if she had no idea that John was married at this point. You knew he was married, didn't you? No, I swear I didn't. Please believe me. I've seen your messages with John. He's telling you he'd rather go out to dinner with you than with me, his wife, isn't he? Well, about that. Caught off guard by my words, Lisa glanced at John. John had indeed sent her messages referring to me as his wife. Her reaction made it abundantly clear that she was lying. When I called her out on her lie, she fell silent, as if she had nothing to say. The shared habit of effortlessly lying, assuming they wouldn't get caught, was almost a perfect match. I calmly thought to myself how well they suited each other. Well, what do you have to say? He told me he was going to leave you, but he never did get around to filing for divorce. So you thought it would be a good idea to push me down the stairs? I didn't know he was like that. I swear, if I had, I would never done something like this. It doesn't matter who it is. Cheating is unacceptable. What are you even saying? As I rebuked her, Lisa felt silent once more, looking like a child scolded by a parent. Even after all of this, John, who remained silent and refused to discuss anything, led me to propose a divorce.
Divorce? Isn't that going a bit too far?
A bit too far. So that's how you see all of this, huh? John finally opened his mouth, a look of shock on his face as if I'd suddenly started making unreasonable demands. I was disappointed to realize that John had given so little thought to everything that had happened up until now. I couldn't possibly continue to live with someone who had lied to me with such ease, thinking he could deceive me, and who had even pushed me down the stairs. When I made this clear, John seemed quite down, as if he might finally be showing some remorse. If we divorce, you can freely go out to dinner with her, can't you?
I can't defend you, John. I hope you take this as a chance to reflect on your behavior.
Even Bob chided John, who simply nodded in agreement, his shoulders sagging as he murmured,
All right.
He was just pretending to be obedient, a trick I've seen him pull countless times before. That's why I decided to press on, putting them on the spot. When you first got caught lying, you promised to make amends, yet you kept betraying me with Lisa.
I'm sorry, I truly am. If a divorce will make Michelle feel better, then let's do it.
Do you think it's just going to end there? We're definitely splitting the property as well. When I mentioned about splitting the property, both of them clearly showed their disturbance. They probably thought they could divorce amicably and be together, but that wasn't going to happen. They both pleaded for a chance to discuss things, hoping to appease me, but I knew they were both capable of lying and deceit, and John even had a history of pushing me down the stairs. I couldn't possibly believe them anymore. If you'd confessed when I asked you to tell me the truth, things might have turned out differently, don't you think?
Even if I'd been honest, you would have blamed me anyway, right? Of course I would have. Do you still not realize what you've done? You cheated on Michelle, and both of you lied about it. People lie. It's just a part of life. You can't justify lying to protect yourself at the expense of hurting someone you care about. Don't lump me in with you.
Even after John accepted the divorce, this back and forth continued, ultimately involving even his parents. The sight of John's parents-in-law persistently apologizing on behalf of John, who should be a mature adult by now, still makes my heart ache whenever I recall it. Even as we were on the brink of divorce, it was Bob's words that silenced the ever-complaining John.
John, I beg you, as a friend, don't let me down anymore. Even you're saying that to me now. I hope the day will come when you understand what you've done.
Realizing these words marked Bob's decision to cut ties with him, John was left speechless, his eyes wide in shock. Later on, it seems John remarried Lisa, and they sent a postcard to our house, seemingly to spite me. The message attached was filled with resentment towards me, stating that their life has been made difficult due to the property division settlement I demanded from him. But there's no reason for me to be resented. If he wants to resent something, he should resent his own actions. Disgusted by his childish message that only focused on himself, I threw the postcard into a trash bin. Just as I was thinking about this, John suddenly showed up at my house. From the commotion at the front door, it seems Lisa has been aggressive towards him, and they are not getting along.
Michelle, because of the property division settlement I paid you, Lisa is always blaming me.
The property division is something you're responsible for due to your actions, not because I made an unreasonable demand.
Have you ever thought about how I feel, being stripped of such a large amount of money? Lisa blames me for being poor and even says I might push her down the stairs at every opportunity.
Trying to gain sympathy for his pitiful self and blaming me, John loudly expressed his grievances. But none of what he said could possibly resonate with me. Instead, hearing such things from a person who never considered my feelings, I could only give a bitter smile. Everything he said was his own doing, and I opened the door in disbelief, next to my new lover standing side by side.
Bob, why are you with Michelle? If I leave Michelle alone, bad bugs will come.
Even after the divorce, Bob has been dedicatedly checking up on me. Attracted by his kindness, I decided to start dating him. Seeing Bob, who was angrier than me about John's behavior, John had no choice but to back down and quietly left.
He really doesn't learn, does he?
He should reflect on making his parents apologize, at least. Seeing John, who showed no signs of remorse, Bob and I watched him leave, with a look of disbelief on our faces. They say people become stubborn as they age, but I don't want to become like that.
Well, no matter when he comes, I'll protect you, Michelle.
Thank you, but if you just don't lie to me, that's enough for me. Even though I knew I wasn't at fault, I had been severely depressed because of John, but Bob patiently waited for me. In order to repay his feelings, I decided to look forward again and move on.